When we got started, our goal was to become a $100 million company and then a $1 billion company. Then we IPO'd and became a $3 billion company instantly. And of course, the company has grown since then. These customers were from financial trading groups. And that was the era of high frequency trading, where a 1 microsecond advantage could give you enough of a lead over your competition where you can make $1 million of profit every day. You know what was the most requested feature from our customers in 2008? It was a sticker to put on top of our switch to hide our logo so that none of their competitors could find out how great our product was and that they were using it. When we won Microsoft Azure in 2012, they had notified us for 40 gig. We had been selected. We were able to beat Cisco and others to get to that point. It was a massive opportunity for us, and we were going to power all of Azure at that point. Just at the start of COVID, we used to have $500 million of inventory on hand. And then during COVID, we went ahead and increased that 10x and fought for multiple years. It was risky. If it didn't work out, we would have been in serious trouble. The reason it's so important is, in fact, Meta had published a paper about a year ago, which showed that in their clusters, the GPUs are sitting idle about 33% of the time, waiting for network I/O to complete.
Hello everyone, welcome to Bite into Future. Today we have an exclusive episode covering an amazing person, amazing career, helping to build an amazing company. Anshul Sadana, welcome.
Thank you, Howie. Thanks for having me over here, and it's great being with you.
Yes, you know, when I said it's amazing, it's truly amazing. You started your career from Cisco, but joined us Arista and helped to build Arista to a, pretty much $100 billion company. Not too many people can claim that. You were there from almost the beginning. We will unpack a lot of that, right? Not just for your career growth, but also the company growth, right? From a startup to such a big company. And also, a big tectonic technology shift in the last, 15, 17 years. And I would love to hear more about that, because what's going to happen next, you will have, a lot more insights. So with that, first, tell us a little bit about yourself, starting from the beginning of your career to where we are, and then we can go from here.
Well, thank you, Howie. It's been an amazing journey. I started my undergrad in electrical engineering. Then I came to the US to do my master's in computer science. I was at University of Illinois. And when I graduated, I got an opportunity to work at Cisco.
And that was 1999.
That was 1999.
And everyone wanted to join Cisco. It's like the Google, Facebook of the today.
Well, it was the era of the internet, right? And
yes.
Cisco was the company making the internet, so it was a great place to work.
Maybe it's the OpenAI today.
Yes, the systems world was complex, and not many people know this, but the code that runs on these switches or routers is a good 30 to 50 million lines of code. So joining one of the teams there, this was the Cat4K team. This was an acquisition Cisco had done of Andy Bechtolsheim's Granite systems. And just after the acquisition, I happened to join that team. So I got to work with some fabulous people. And
what was the company name from Andy's company?
Well, so Andy had founded Granite Systems, and Granite got acquired by Cisco and became the Cat4K switching team. And I joined the Cat4K at Cisco at that time. And
by the way, I take it back, not a Google, Facebook of today. It's the NVIDIA today. Just like NVIDIA is powering the AI, right? Cisco was powering the internet at the time.
That is correct. So I joined this team, and these are fabulous people, really smart, and I get to work on projects where we're working on the world's first triple speed product. So the same port could support 10 meg, 100 meg, and 1 gig. Doing all of that for desktop connectivity. That was the era of getting gigabit to the desktop, right. Power over Ethernet, wireless was just starting to happen. So it was a great time. And as I started doing that, we got into some trouble. Our products ran into issues, and my management team came to me and said, hey, can you help us look at these customer problems? You can work on this other product later. And in life, you generally as a young engineer, want to work on the next gen thing. That's the cool technology, not work on some customer problem. But as I went into that direction and I started handling escalations for our product, it got me immense exposure to how customers use and think of technology. And these customers were running into issues. They want to return the product. We had to root cause it. We had to give them workarounds. You get into negotiations with the sales teams and the customers on discounts for upgrades because the customer has issues. I had to work with the finance team on warranty and reserves and calculations. I had to work with the manufacturing team on tracking fixes in the field and repairing and replacing products. So that exposure was pretty wide. I had a pretty good understanding of how the company functions end to end.
Right. So it looks, boring from the outside, right? Just to support a customer, but there's so much complexity around it.
That's correct. That's correct. So the engineering team one side, customer escalation on the other side was a very, very well-rounded experience that in hindsight was extremely valuable as I took on my next step. So after Cisco, I joined Arista. This is around 2007. We were a small company. We were about 12 plus engineers. And we were just deciding what product to launch and which markets to tackle. When we got started, we launched our products in 2007 at Supercomputing in Reno. And some of the customers or prospective customers came to us at the trade show, just gave us their visiting cards saying, just call me, I'm ready to buy your product. We said, but I haven't even told you what the product does. They said, we know, but we are ready to buy the product. And turned out we had the lowest latency switches on the planet. These customers were from financial trading groups, and that was the era of high frequency trading, where a 1 microsecond advantage could give you enough of a lead over your competition where you can make $1 million of profit every day. And these companies were very much competitive, cutting edge, wanted the fastest products on.
1 microsecond, not millisecond.
We're talking 1 microsecond advantage. Our products were 3 to 4 microseconds faster than the best competitor. So a huge advantage. Now there was one other requirement though, that the product had to be high quality because you cannot cause an outage in a financial trading network. And we had built a rock solid foundation with our operating system. And as a result of that, we were very successful in the market. But that also gave us a customer base that we could call for references. And they would vouch for the quality of the product.
So most of the startups in Silicon Valley, they are chasing this thing called a product market fit. In that context, would you consider this high frequency trading a product market fit thing for Arista?
Absolutely. It's a very, very good question. As we are getting started, it is very hard to know upfront which markets we should be chasing. Clearly, we were in the switching space. These are high-speed switches. These were 10 gig switches when the world was still at 1 gig. So HPC, high-performance computing, was a natural fit. So we had some customers in that space that were interested. But we also had these financial trading customers. We were keeping an eye on the web companies. During those days, they were not called cloud. They were called Web 2.0. So we were keeping a watch on them as well. And the products we were building for financial trading were essentially a stepping stone to the cloud because it was building on top of the features the financial trading needed and going towards the cloud.
But did you even know that this, is a stepping stone, or this is the hindsight that this is a step stone?
No, 2008 was an interesting period. It was the financial crisis. There was a major recession. One of our early customers was Lehman Brothers. And as you know, they went bankrupt and they shut down. So in that market, you're chasing every potential customer that you can get to generate revenue. And high frequency trading was very, very important for us to get to the first $100 million of business. And equally important in getting us a customer base that we could count on as a reference, because these other large companies, including the cloud, would want that before they can use your product. So it was an amazing stepping stone. In hindsight, it worked out. But directionally, I think we were always aligned to what the cloud needed We didn't have all the products ready on day one. So we had to build on something, get started, build a business, build a foundation, and then evolve from there.
So what is the learning for the entrepreneurs out there, right? Because what I'm hearing is there's something that unexpected, or at least not as expected, in terms of, hey, financial industry just came to you and they say, I wanted to buy it because of the low latency, because I have this high frequency trading. You didn't design this thing from the beginning that is the market, right? So there is some accidental part. But I'm pretty sure it's not, 100%. What is the learning for people? Like, how to think about this, right? I'm going towards a direction. I don't know what customers exactly want. And then with the hindsight, what's the learning for the entrepreneur?
Yeah, there's a lot of luck in terms of finding that product market fit, because as you said, we're not expecting high frequency trading or HFT to just show up. Sometimes luck matters. At the same time, when you're given an opportunity, you have to execute. The biggest learning was that you have to stay very disciplined on which markets you serve and which ones you don't, because you don't want to stretch yourself and do a little bit of everything, and then you will just not be the best in the world in the product category that you're trying to aim for. So what we ended up doing is focusing on financial trading for the first few years. Once we realized this can work out, we just simply executed and executed and executed, did every feature that they needed, and became essentially the talk in the town. Do you know what was the most requested feature from our customers in 2008? It was a sticker to put on top of our switch to hide our logo so that none of their competitors could find out how great our product was and that they were using it.
That is the number one feature from your financial industry customer. Wow, that's interesting. So you're talking about the discipline. I think what you're saying is, maybe people can stumble onto something, but the more difficult thing is actually stay on that course, right? Be super disciplined. And I think that I sort of see that. I sort of saw that over the years, from our side. So that's a high frequency trading, right? $100 million business, but you guys do billions of dollars today. So that's just the one initial success. So tell us more about how you go from there.
So while we were working with financial trading, we were also working with the cloud companies at that time. The cloud was in its very early stages, and they needed products that could scale to significant network sizes that had not been imagined by the bigger companies at that point. Little bit of history on Arista. Even before I joined, in 2005, Google had issued an RFP to the whole industry saying, can you give me a network for 10,000 servers connected at 1 gig, completely non-blocking, and at $100 per port?
And that was unheard of.
The larger companies, number one, didn't have such a product, and number two, were not interested. They said, hey Google, you're the only company that wants this. It's a distraction for us, and we're not even sure whether we'll make enough margin.
$100 a port.
They may not make enough margin. So Google went on to build their own switches once the industry said no. But by the time Arista was born and growing up, we still had that RFP in mind. We knew there's a need for large scalable networks. Not Google, but Microsoft happened to be one of our largest cloud customers early on. Microsoft was doing Azure. It was growing like gangbusters. During those days, the storage clusters were being talked about in exabytes. And we were thinking, what's an exabyte? We know about gigabytes, we know about terabytes, we know about petabytes, and then comes exabyte. So during that era, when Microsoft came to us and said, can you build us a cluster for so many storage nodes? These are over 10,000 storage nodes, non-blocking at 10 gig. Everything just clicked. We had the product direction. We had the software that was very reliable to build a cloud network. And we had an architecture which got transformed into what is now known as the leaf and spine to truly keep on scaling it like a distributed cluster.
So this was many years later when Microsoft had the requirement that you felt like, hey, this is my architecture, literally was beautiful. How much of that had to do with, how much the Google RFP, right, influenced your architecture back then?
I wouldn't say the Google RFP influenced the architecture. I think the Google RFP was an impetus for the products, the product direction, that there's a need for non-blocking high-speed networks in the world. What was happening in the ecosystem was there was a lot of talk about active-active, because the early days of networking were active standby.
Yeah.
One of the protocols used in many networks was spanning tree.
Yeah.
And if you are from the network industry, you know how many outages that has caused, because it's active standby, and the standby doesn't really take over when you have a failure, because you trigger a bug and the network just crashes and you have an outage.
And whoever managed the spanning tree needs a PhD degree in networking to manage it.
That's correct. It was very complicated. So it's very fragile, and you cannot run a large business on such a fragile ecosystem. So we were chasing active-active, and there were efforts being made, including in the IEEE with the technology called Trill. And there were efforts being made in the routing protocols in the IETF as well. And we looked at all these choices and said, it has to be distributed. The only way you can do it distributed is just like the internet. All these routers run BGP. If one router goes down, the internet doesn't go down. You just route around it. We did the same thing with our architecture. We built a spine, which is distributed. It can be 4 different switches, it can be 8-way, it can be 16-way, it can be 64 of them. If one switch fails, only 1/64th of your bandwidth is lost, and you can route around it. So with that spine, we had many leaf switches or edge switches or top of rack switches connecting into the spine. And that was the basis of our cloud network. We could build a cluster of 10,000 servers connected at 10 gig, fully non-blocking, using this leaf and spine architecture, and it never went down.
And then that pretty much defined the architecture of the future or the contemporary cloud networking, right? The leaf spine or the architecture. So one question I had in my mind that when you talk about this is, obviously you designed this architecture for scale out, Google scale, Microsoft scale, that's great. But what about unit economics, right? Natural thinking is $100 a port or the large scale. Sure, Microsoft needs your product, but that means it's cheap. Potentially, it means cheap. How did you guys think about this, right? Cloud is good, but not much money to be made by the vendors potentially. So how did you think about that at the time? Of course, years later, $100 billion market cap, it's not a question anymore. But back then, I remember 10 years ago, I was thinking about this myself.
Yes. The cloud was a foundation for us at Arista to go after other markets, including enterprise, media and entertainment, and so on.
Right.
And the same product set is used by everyone. Now, the cloud is obviously lower margin because of the scale, but you get economies of scale and leverage within the company. The same R&D effort, the same manufacturing effort can be leveraged for a much greater volume. And over time, that results in reasonable profitability. Now, at Arista, the cloud customers have been phenomenal for us because they form roughly 40% plus of our business. We call them the cloud titans. But we also have enterprises and others and so on. It's a large TAM. The entire TAM is about $25 to $30 billion just in data center switching, out of which, again, half is in the cloud, the half is outside of the cloud in the enterprise and so on. So it was a very scalable business.
So maybe we can talk about just in general, this architecture in general, right? Last 15 years, and then what's going to happen next, right? Can you give our audience a high-level summary of what you saw, the big wave of the networking requirements, and then now it's the AI world, right? Everyone's talking about building AI cluster. What are the new requirements? What are the new things? Whether you are the big public company or the startup, what should they know about the big picture at least?
Absolutely. So first of all, these cloud designs have allowed our customers to scale significantly, and more importantly, also provide a lot of uptime. In enterprise networks, companies still schedule maintenance time or downtime, and you get this notice on your application, sorry, the network is down or the system is down from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. When was the last time you got an email from a cloud company saying, dear customer, the cloud is down from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.? They don't do that. Does that mean they don't need any maintenance or fixes or patches? Not true at all. They have a very complex amount of infrastructure. But because it's a distributed system, they can schedule the maintenance such that you're routing around it and never getting impacted. That ability gave our customers a large scalable infrastructure that evolved and kept on growing and growing and growing. Some of our largest customers have millions and millions of ports active running in their infrastructure. Now you come to the world of AI. So we had the enterprise networks. They were highly oversubscribed, generally active standby.
That was 15, 20 years ago, right? Highly oversubscribed on the enterprise side.
Correct. Then you have the cloud, which is non-blocking, scalable. There are designs that Microsoft has. Facebook has their own designs with parallel planes that they showcase at OCP. Amazon and Google do their own things as well. So the world has evolved to very large scale in the front end of the cloud. But on the back end are these AI clusters. The AI clusters drive a lot more bandwidth than a standard CPU or a storage node. So as an example, for the current cloud networks today, most customers are happy with 100 gig, and for some use cases, they have 400 gig. But for AI, there's a mad rush to get to 800 gig as quickly as possible, and then 1.6 terabit per server or per GPU as quickly as possible, because there's that much bandwidth that is needed by these AI applications.
So it's not only just the GPU hungry, data hungry, but also networking bandwidth hungry. So where are we on this journey from the industry point of view?
Correct. So the world is in 2024 just now starting to adopt 800 gigabits per GPU. And the reason it's so important is, in fact, Meta had published a paper about a year ago which showed that in their clusters, the GPUs are sitting idle about 33% of the time, waiting for network I/O to complete. And that's wasting a lot of power, that's wasting a lot of capital cost as well. GPUs are expensive, as everyone knows. So as a result of that, you want the network to go as fast as possible, because all these GPUs are working in lockstep. They do a calculation, they exchange results, they do a calculation, they exchange results, they do a calculation, and so on, until you're done with your entire training model. But that can take weeks and weeks. If out of those 3 or 4 weeks, you're wasting a third of your time, that's very inefficient. Hence the need for as much networking as possible, non-blocking. Thousands of GPUs talking to each other all together is what everyone wants instantly.
So is that just a bandwidth thing? Because we never designed a network, or the industry never designed a network with this level of the bandwidth hunger, right? And how they interact with each other. Is that just the bandwidth, or there's more than bandwidth? Meaning that do you see that architecture being shifted? Like the leaf spine architecture may actually evolve. How do you think about this?
So there are certainly new topologies that the cloud companies are using or deploying for AI networks, but they are largely derived from the same leaf spine architecture because they're resilient. Even if one fails, you're not dependent on routing around it and so on. As you look at AI networks or AI infrastructure builds, the other focus has been power, because GPUs are quite power hungry. An average CPU used to take a few hundred watts.
Yep.
Each GPU today takes somewhere between 1.5 to 2.5 kilowatts. And some future GPUs are projected to be at 3 kilowatts per GPU. Each motherboard has 8 GPUs interconnected together, and then you have multiple GPU server blades connected together in a rack. Then you have multiple of these racks connected together. So today, in fact, Meta recently announced they built a cluster with 24,000 GPUs, H100s, and there are other companies claiming to be very soon building 32,000 GPU clusters or 64,000 GPU clusters. A 64,000 GPU cluster at 2 kilowatts per GPU essentially maxes out the largest data center in the United States today. Because you're talking 100 megawatts or more. It's amazing, it's phenomenal that that's where the world is. Now, if you can make that more efficient, it is a huge saving to the customer and essentially even for global warming, because we need to reduce power consumption where we can.
I have one more technical question before, talking more about the other entrepreneurship, career development sort of the topic. The technical question is, there's Infiniband, right? And then there's Ethernet. What is going on? Is there such a fight, or there's a debate, or what's going on in that part of the world?
It's a very interesting time. Many years ago when Arista was just started, there was this company called Myricom, and they had a technology called MyriNet. It was being used by a lot of HPC customers. Over time, Ethernet came and won.
Yeah.
Infiniband has been around for quite some time and has been used in HPC clusters, especially for RDMA workloads at smaller scale.
I worked with them from my VMware days. They were chugging along all the time, never found a killer use case until
AI
now,
happened.
right?
Correct.
Yes.
Now, because NVIDIA has an end-to-end bundle stack, what they've done really well with Infiniband is making it work out of the box for these customers. And when you have a small scale, that works okay. When you have a larger scale, you get a lot of single points of failure, whether it's a subnet manager or other complexities, if there's outages or a link flap and so on. So as a result of that, there is a need to find a more scalable solution. Guess what? It already exists. It's called IP and Ethernet, and it works really well on the other side of the cloud networks, where customers already have hundreds or millions of switches deployed at large scale with millions of servers. Now, AI is very sensitive to loss, whereas in TCP/IP networks, if you get a little bit of loss, you can retransmit. You cannot do that in AI networks because the GPUs are waiting, and while you can retry and retransmit, you're going to bring down the performance of the entire cluster because all these GPUs are waiting for this one last guy to finish its job. So as a result of that, there's a search for lossless networks. What's happening in the Ethernet world, number one, Ethernet is already quite good, works really well, and customers who are already deploying it have been very happy with the results. There are lots of benchmarking data available in the industry and so on. In addition to that, there's a new consortium formed called UEC, or Ultra Ethernet Consortium. And the UEC is enhancing the Ethernet spec so that the NIC, the servers, the switches can all work well together and can either be lossless or handle just a little bit of loss. And as a result of that, you get these massive economies of scale and efficiencies with an Ethernet network that you don't get with InfiniBand, but you also get the reliability that the customer is searching for. And at scale, you can't really use InfiniBand anyway, so everyone has to go that route, whether it's a year or two. It's only a matter of time.
So you're a believer of Ethernet still, obviously.
Well, Ethernet has been around for over 50 years. In fact, 2023 was the 50th birthday of Ethernet.
Wow.
And, Dave Metcalf, who is the founder of Ethernet, was there at the Computer Science Museum in Mountain View. And he talked about it at that celebration. Over time, many technologies have come. And there are only two types of technologies in the world. There's Ethernet and Ethernaut. Ethernaut has never won.
Yeah. I remember all the battle, over the time, including from IP, TCP/IP, ATM, Ethernet versus the rest, Ethernaut, that's a good word. So from that point of view, I heard a few things for the future. The non-blockings will continue to be a key attribute, right? Super high bandwidth, sounds like this is on the horizon, 800 gig, and then 1.6 terabits. And then more than that, the lossless sounds like yet another requirement. So it sounds like whether for Arista or Cisco or the startups, there are plenty of things to do in the AI era.
Well, a lot of the focus in the AI right now is on the application space, because I think that's where there's tremendous opportunity still. You can apply it in every possible use case as well. But you're right, a lot of investments in the infrastructure space as well. And at Arista, we were really glad to be partnered with Broadcom. And Broadcom works on merchant silicon, but merchant silicon has come a long way and delivers great performance and reliability. So a lot of tuning that happens on buffer tuning of packet memory and so on to make RDMA work or to make ECMP hashing work. And I think along with our Broadcom partnership, it worked out really, really well.
Wow, that's interesting. So Broadcom, Arista, also kind of another important pillar to power this, AI cluster or AI boom we have today. So that's great. A lot of the AI, we'll continue to discuss this thing. But, one question I, wanted to ask you, on this journey, right, 17 years, great run, all the amazing technology and then company growth. But can you share with us, from your point of view, right, for our new entrepreneurs out there today, they wanted to be the next Cisco, next, Arista, next whoever, right, or Google, Facebook. What are the things you felt like you learned that you would love to share with our sort of the next generation of entrepreneurs that some key insights that hey, this is something I didn't realize, but this is so critical to the success, not just Arista, but a company's growth.
Absolutely. There's just so many things that come to mind, but I'll share a few of them that are key in my view. Number one, when you're in startup mode, clearly you need to have a good business plan. You need to have to go after a large TAM. It's very rare to have a successful startup in a market that you're creating yourself. It does happen, but it's very rare. So you really want to go after a large TAM. Now, in the early days, and this happened at Arista, you just have to roll up your sleeves and do everything. And that entrepreneurial spirit of, I will take whatever it takes to be successful is extremely important. We were talking about this the other day. In the early days at Arista, I had to be the first IT engineer. I set up the phone lines for the company. I did research on how do you buy an 800 number and a 500 phone number DID or a direct dial block. We had to set up all of our labs. We had to set up our badge readers and our badge access, facilities, infrastructure, all the way to the customer facing stuff, whether it's the website, the support portal, how will customers interact with you and so on. But that's one side on the back end, documentation, things like that. On the other side, when you're working with customers, they want to see your commitment. Are you truly there for them? And as a startup, you only get one chance. You cannot mis-execute at that time. I'll share an old story. In 2010, 2011, we got selected to be the network of choice for a company that was doing all of the broadcast production for the Winter Olympics, which was being which was being held in Canada, and they were streaming all the content directly to the big data center in Las Vegas, and over there the packets get cached, and after that it's okay because they can mix with ads, whatnot, and so on. But if you drop anything before it hits the cache, that frame is lost forever. This is IP production, very new during those days. Now, we're really proud to be part of the Winter Olympics. At the same time, we're nervous. What if something goes wrong? And about a few hours before they were to go live, they had a failure. And they used their last spare switch to replace that failed device and called us and said, look, we have no spares left. You cannot have any more issues. And we're saying, well, we'll try our very best, but what can we do?
And the Murphy's Law sometimes kicks in. Did that kick in?
Well, I think we were a little bit better prepared for that. So around 4 p.m., I get this phone call on a Sunday or Saturday, I forget, over the weekend, that, hey, we have this situation and we have no spares left on site. So I call one of my support engineers. I drive quickly to San Jose airport. The engineer meets me and gives me a spare switch. I hand carry that all the way to Las Vegas, give it to the customer, like, here's your spare switch in case something went wrong. The customer was so amazed. They still remember that incident. And very recently, they sent me a note thanking me about that incident, and we have a photo with that customer on when we brought that replacement switch for them and so on. And it was a very successful event. There were no outages. Murphy's Law did not kick in. We had a successful event and we became very popular.
But you do whatever it takes to even be ahead of the Murphy's Law, right? That's
Correct.
sort of the important part.
Correct. No, absolutely. So I would say that is another direction. The third one we talked about is you have to stay focused on your goal, on your domain. And the hardest part as an entrepreneur, if you're involved in product management, product strategy, is to say no. We had so many early customers where we said, no, we're not going to do it right now. Can we come back and meet you in a few years when we are ready? That is extremely important to maintain that discipline, succeed in one market and then expand, succeed again, then expand, rather than spreading yourselves thin.
So one of the things I would love to hear your thoughts, because this is a decade later, right? You know, a decade ago, you remember the hottest phrasing term was software-defined network, right? Everyone was talking about it. You know, it's probably not as hot as AI, but almost there, right? You know, every engineer was talking about the software-defined network. And my memory, if my memory serves, is you guys stayed pretty, low profile, meaning that you didn't join the bandwagon, hey, software-defined network this, software-defined network that. What was in your mind at the time, right? You know, it was such a hot topic. Why you decided not to, join the bandwagon, at least not at a, join in the high-profile manner?
Well, based on my previous comment, sometimes you have to say no, because it seems like a distraction. So what was happening, this is around 2012, 2013, 2014 yes. time frame, there were two things going on. One was SDN, software-defined networks. The other was OpenFlow, and they were both related. You could build an OpenFlow-based network and have a controller control which flows get programmed, and then you can forward packets that way. But to some extent, it's like going backwards. You're building a static network with a small controller rather than a distributed network using BGP, which is what our leaf spine designs were already doing. And the OpenFlow-based networks would be more fragile. They don't scale. And the controller becomes a single point of failure. Now, there were a few companies that were already doing SDN and were doing it really well. Those happen to be the cloud companies. And of all the companies that have talked about it openly that I can share, Google is one of them. They have a lot of SDN controllers. Their controllers are distributed. They don't have a single point of failure. They apply business logic very clearly. So in those situations, we partnered with our cloud customers and allowed them to customize our product and run their own code inside our switches. That agent talks to their controller and gets them the outcome they're looking for. However, for the rest of the market, including the enterprises and so on, this was never going to work in our mind. So as a result, we decided to stay a little bit behind on OpenFlow and SDN controllers in the early days. However, as the market evolved, we did see the need for automation rather than protocol stack being in a controller. That was the basis for Cloud Vision. We built an automation plane for the entire network. This was the first time where you could manage hundreds or even thousands of switches all from one place. And one of the most interesting features we had added at that point wasn't just that you can configure and manage, but we talked about our high frequency trading customers. There's an interesting story about our financial trading customers. Markets open at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, and quite often they would call us at 5 or 6 a.m. and say, hey, last night I was making a change to my network and I modified the configuration. I did this and then I did this, but now it doesn't work. Can you help me? Say, wait. Can you walk me back on what did you change? You say, I'm not 100% sure. I think I did this, but I'm not really sure. So give them a minute. Let them go. We would ask them, what exactly did you change? And they would say, I'm not really sure. So then it clicked in our minds, why not build a system that remembers everything you're doing? And we built that into Cloud Vision. And we call that the time machine for the network. You could roll back the entire network to last Friday if you wanted. And it took only 5 minutes to restore all configuration, bring back the entire system to the state it used to be. That was our sort of focus on SDN, basically essentially an automation controller for the network.
Stay focused on the value to the customer rather than what's sort of the hot buzzword out there. That's great. So we talked about a lot about the staying focused. And then to our entrepreneurs, next generation entrepreneurs out there in particular, what are the lessons you can share with us in terms of building the team, growing the company, other than the staying focused part?
Absolutely. Well, as an entrepreneur, you have to truly be passionate about what you're doing. You have to enjoy what you're doing. Your commitment has to be in there. In addition, you roll up your sleeves and do everything that's necessary for the business to succeed, right? There is no hesitation. But as the company grows, as the business needs grow, you hire really good people and scale with them. And I think that part, maintaining the culture of the team, was extremely important and is extremely important for any successful entrepreneur out there as well.
You mentioned to me that you spend half of your time doing hiring. Why? And then, can you just tell us a little bit more?
Absolutely. Hiring is the most important part for an entrepreneur because you want to bring people on board who are smart, who can execute well, and also are a good cultural match for the team. Because without that, you'll start going in different directions. When you have great culture, you have great trust. When you have great trust, you don't need a lot of processes to cross-check everything. You just tell the other person, hey, can you take care of this? You know it will be done. That was the reason why myself and everyone else at the company spent a lot of time hiring, interviewing, making sure these are the best in the industry and were able to carry on the mission that we were on.
Setting the bar very high early on pays off over the time, right?
Absolutely.
So another thing is you managed so many different teams over the time. How did you wind up, being able to learn so many different things, right? Not just the technology, the product, later on SE, sales, marketing potentially. How did you learn that? And also, how did you do the work-life balance?
Absolutely. There are two aspects here. One, I just finished my MBA before I joined Arista. And that gave me immense confidence that I could do anything new.
You can change the world.
I can change the world. Now, that was maybe a bit irrational, but it didn't matter. It gave me the confidence to go out and try new things. And as they were successful, I could take on more as well. Whether it was running the IT for a company, building our first phone system, getting all the toll-free numbers for support, building the website, getting the pre-sales team going, product management, product priorities, margin analysis for cost structure of the product, and so on. Everything just started to come back together. But as you do that, there's always more. Actually, let's take this part out. Now, at the same time, work at a startup or any company as you're growing is quite intense. And we had a global team. We had engineers here in Silicon Valley on the East Coast. We had employees covering sales and support functions and so on all over the world, in Europe as well as Asia and so on. So it was pretty much around the clock.
So did
job.
you work 24/7 as well without going home, or what did you do?
Fortunately, we had a great team, but the work was intense. And right during that window, we had two kids. Our daughter was born first, and that changed my schedule. And what I started to do was start getting up at 5 a.m. I would finish my phone calls for Asia first. Then I would go on to Europe. Then I would go on to New York, finish that, go to work by 9 a.m., then cover all of the needs for US customers. And by 3 or 4 p.m., again, you're on to Asia calls, but I used to end by 6 or 7 p.m. And that way, you're ready to be back with family, especially for dinner. That was extremely important to me and to my wife. And talking about my wife, Anshu, I couldn't have done this without her support. She was extremely helpful. She was the one who pushed me to go to my MBA, to move on to business side of things. She was very supportive of moving to Arista, which was a tiny startup at that point, and taking the risk, while she took care of the family and was also working full-time throughout. But it has been tremendous. Because of her, I could take on more risk and more work as well.
So it was very important for you to find a way to still go home to do dinner and then, balance, do reasonable work-life balance, over the years, even though as being a global company, you're a global executive, but, it's still you managed to make this happen.
Absolutely. And to some extent, when work is fun, you don't get that tired. So you have to make sure that you're enjoying, and to all the young entrepreneurs out there, you have to be passionate, and then you will enjoy what you're doing at your work.
Yes, because, it's a roller coaster every day, every week. If you don't enjoy it, you are going to burn out very quickly.
That's right.
So 17 years. What's next? Because I actually was telling our joint friend about, hey, I'm going to do this interview. They said, hey, what's next for Anshul? Anything you can share?
Well, it's still very early on. Right now, my focus is to take a break with the kids. We'll be traveling this summer, taking time off, recharging, and then when I'm back in the fall, I'll start meeting entrepreneurs and VCs and others yet again to explore more options, but not there yet.
So before I wrap up this thing, I wanted to ask 2 questions. The first question is about what is the most challenging moment over this 17-year career?
Well, we had several challenges. Typically, you go through that with companies, but maybe 1 or 2 that come to mind. Number 1, we got into this legal battle with Cisco, and the lawsuit was not easy to predict because you're not sure what the outcome will be. You don't control everything in that sense. Now, we did come through. We had to design around against a few patents. We won many of the other claims that they had thrown at us, that they accused us of copying or copyright violation and so on, and we proved they were all wrong. So we came through, but that was a challenging period because we had to convince customers that yes, this lawsuit is going on, but believe me, you can still buy my product, and a lot of trust and credibility was on the line. But I think we came through. The second one was also an unpredictable event, which was COVID. We are doing great. Our products are great. Customers want them. All of a sudden, the entire world comes to a halt.
Supply chain
Crisis. We can't get the components necessary to build our products. At the same time, customers want to buy even more of what we are building because of the boom in work from home and the use of internet technologies and social media and so on. So during that period, I had to spend a lot of energy looking out for alternate components, talking to suppliers, talking to vendors, researching how does the ecosystem work, all the way up to TSMC and everything in the middle. And we went ahead and leaned in at Arista. We invested over $5 billion in buying components ahead of time. And as a result of that, we could assure supply to our customers. We could look at our suppliers and get our fair allocation, and sometimes have more than what we had originally planned for. As a result of that, throughout COVID at Arista, not only did we never miss a single quarter, we actually grew faster than expected. And part of the reason was we had the supply, the customers knew it, and we got really good at it over time.
So this is the $5 billion you purchased for multi-year?
That's right. Just at the start of COVID, we used to have $500 million of inventory on hand. Mm-hmm. And then during COVID, we went ahead and increased that 10x and bought for multiple years. It was risky. If it didn't work out, we would have been in serious trouble, but it really worked out.
Wow, I didn't know that story. This is amazing because every company, right, every industry even ran into this issue, right? I couldn't even buy a car.
Right.
But a few companies actually thrived, despite that. Tesla being one of them. I didn't realize part of the success of the Arista is because of you overcame the supply chain in somewhat audacious way, but in some way, the innovative way. That's a very. So you give these two examples. I'm surprised you didn't mention the very, very early days of the Arista. Like, is anything you would feel like, hey, that was, very early days of the Arista, super big challenge. Anything you can share on that one?
Well, in the very early days when we got started, in the networking industry, the world was known as Cisco and the Seven Dwarfs.
I was going to say that.
And in fact, some companies talked to us and said, hey, welcome to being the eighth dwarf. And that was not a lot of hope for us to survive and succeed.
And by the way, just to give our audience the background, the Cisco and the Seven Dwarfs lasted for a long time, right? And then the Seven Dwarfs probably rotated over the time. And HP joined the battle, Dell joined the battle, but none of them, made a big dent. So yes, I clearly remember that, is Arista just yet another dwarf, or, yes. So how did you think about that when people said this is, Cisco and the Seven Dwarfs, and I'm joining a battle and I'm being perceived as a dwarf? What was in your mind?
Well, we were actually quite confident that if we built great products, that we could have a better outcome. In no scenario could we imagine at that time that we would reach the level we have achieved today. But as a young entrepreneur, and I talk to a lot of VCs and others as well, and a lot of people tell me, sometimes when people just show up saying, hey, I have a business plan, this is just like the Google idea, this will be as successful as Google. That's a bad plan, because that's not how the real life works. You start out with a goal, you achieve that, and then you go on to the next goal, you achieve that, then you go on to the next goal. So at Arista, our first goal was to achieve $100 million in revenue. Our next goal was to achieve $500 million in revenue. That's when we went IPO. Our next goal was to achieve $1 billion in revenue. And gradually we kept on increasing our goals as we got line of sight that we can do more as well. So it was an amazing journey to get to that point. It was scary. We lost quite often in the early days. At the same time, we knew which customers could potentially work out and invested all our energy in that, whether it's financial trading, some of the largest banks in the United States, whether it's some of the cloud companies. And as a result of that, we are where we are today.
So one of the argument, why Cisco would be dominant is, hey, they can always lower the price, and then it's all bets are off. But for Arista, there's a low frequency trading, right? It's a unique feature that you have and Cisco doesn't have. So from that point of view, do you think the product differentiation is the key?
You absolutely have to build a great product. There were two aspects. One, in networking, people compare hardware quite often, and what they don't always compare is software. And the real gap was on hardware, but a lot more on software. So we had to go educate our customers on why EOS, our operating system, is more reliable than the alternates. In addition, you're right, we had to counter free. Our competition was ready to give away switches for free. How do you beat free?
Yeah.
We had designed switches that were so efficient, where even if our competition gave switches for free, the cost of powering those switches for 5 years versus buying Arista switches and powering them for 5 years was still lower cost and more efficient than going to competition. That's really how the cloud also pivoted towards us. They knew it was more reliable and more efficient, and the TCO works out because yes, others can give it for free, but this one has 1/5 the power consumption, which over years just simply adds up.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. I remember Jason Huang actually recently said something similar for his GPU. He said, well, the competition will come, but even if they do it for free, there's a tremendous value for using my GPU. So that's actually very important for our entrepreneurs out there to remember. Even if you have a dominant guys are willing to give the product for free, You have to have something unique, otherwise, it wouldn't work. So that's great. So you told me the challenging times of your journey, some surprises, but that's wonderful to hear. What about the joyous moment, right? Moments you memorize the most, and then you are the happiest moment. What are those moments you can share?
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure there are 200, but I'm curious what comes to your mind first now.
Yes. No, as you said, there are many happy moments throughout these 16, 17 years at Arista. But maybe there are three that truly stand out. First one is when we won Microsoft Azure in 2012. They had notified us for 40 gig. We had been selected. We were able to beat Cisco and others to get to that point. It was a massive opportunity for us, and we were going to power all of Azure at that point. Now, we didn't have the ability to build so many switches, but we did a mad dash to get the capacity and the scale up, and we delivered and we came through. But getting that award was essentially 3-4 years worth of work finally coming
So
through.
you got an award first, and then figure out how to fulfill that that contract.
The cloud is very hard to forecast. Even when they come through, they say, that's great, we want your product, but now can you build 100 times more than what we forecasted? And you have to come through that. That is, I would say, one of the happiest moments in the early days. The second one was the time of the IPO, because when we got started, our goal was to become a $100 million company and then a $1 billion company. Then we IPO'd and became a $3 billion company instantly. And of course, the company has grown since then. Very recently, we celebrated our 10-year IPO anniversary, in fact, last week. So that was a proud moment.
So Jayshree, Pat Gessinger, they're all, standing there. Yes.
That's right. I would say the third one wasn't as much of a public event, but it was still very memorable, very enjoyable for me. So what was happening during our lawsuit with Cisco is that they were accusing us publicly through blogs and so on of stealing IP, copying and so on. And we knew that wasn't true, but we still had to prove it in court. And one of the cases was a copyright case, which was a jury trial. This is a jury of 12 people here in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley. And as you may have it, just based on how our legal system works, the jury that had been hand-selected included a grocery store manager, a gardener, a UPS truck driver, and many similar folks. And we had to convince them that a command like show IP BGP neighbor is not copyrightable. It comes from the ITA, but they're not technical people. So going through the paces and convincing them that this is what we did, this is how we build the company, this is what we listened to the customers. The customers said this is an industry standard CLI, just go ahead and use it, and so on. And we were able to finally get to a point. The trial is over, the hearing is over, the jury is now making their decision in a closed room. After my part of the trial, I had to be on business travel to Europe. So I'm out there in Europe talking to customers, convincing them that we didn't steal anything, our products are great, you can use them. We do a handshake with the customer. I'm taking my flight back, this is from Denmark, back to the Bay Area. And during my flight, I get this text message. We won the copyright trial.
Wow.
I was in tears. At 30,000 feet, I knew we had come through, and every employee had truly come through because we were able to prove that we were genuine people, we had done the right thing, and we should be the ones winning, not losing. And the jury absolutely supported us.
Wow, proved to gardeners that the BGP related technology is not copyrightable. 30,000 above the ground in tears. That's a fantastic story. In both, memorable moment as well as challenging, you mentioned this lawsuit.
COVID, for example, was also something unpredictable, and just had to deal with it the way it came. It was very hard to anticipate and plan for something like this. It had never happened where the whole world would shut down. But when challenges come, you have to be very quick in responding to them and very agile. During the lawsuit, we had to do a lot of design rounds for our product. We had to move manufacturing to the United States. those were unheard of at that time because everything has moved to Asia, not back to the US during those days. In terms of planning for supply chain, planning for challenges, you have to communicate with your team. So as new information comes up, we used to talk to our team. I used to spend a lot of time during both of these situations, almost on a daily basis, hourly basis with different parts of the team and join their team calls. Hey, I'm going to join for 10 or 15 minutes, just give you a quick update on what's going on. And staying in sync is extremely important because then you're in unison, you work together as a team rather than going in different directions.
Wow, thank you so much, Anshul. This is 17-year journey compressed in half an hour sort of the discussion. I don't think it's enough, but you already shared it with so much insight. Thank you so much to come to the Body into Future, and I wish you the next chapter of your something exciting to be even more fantastic.
Thank you, Harvey. Thanks for having me over, and thanks to all of you for listening.
Thank you.